Hi everybody, I'm Skip Elsheimer, and welcome to the AV Geeks Lunchtime streaming show, where we watch old 16mm films and comment on them. So that last film was some raw footage of the Astrodome. I don't know if this was like the opening of the Astrodome, or just, day in the life of the Astrodome. This came from a collector in Houston, Paul Nelson and his wife Elizabeth. And they used to do screenings under the name Cinema Bomar. And so we've been scanning some stuff for them, and I thought that was pretty great. It was recorded without sound, so it was a lot of raw footage. So it might have been for TV news, or it could have been a promotional thing, but beautiful 60s footage. I love all the women wearing the hats. And actually the light display is really phenomenal. Really a fan of that. And you see those similar types of light displays in Times Square as well, in the 60s, and also Las Vegas. So big fan. Big fan. What time is it? Maybe this Cornet film will let us know. Enjoy.
Well, here's Barbara. What is she doing? We are going to have lots of fun. It's a birthday party. Date, April 7th. Time, 4 o'clock, and so on. Barbara thinks the invitation looks quite neat. Her mother and father think so, too. But Mother says Barbara will have to hurry if she's going to finish writing all the invitations by bedtime. Look at the clock. What time is it? Can you tell time by reading the hands on a clock? Do you know how? Barbara doesn't know all about telling time yet, but she does know that when the short hand, which is the hour hand, points to 7, and the long hand, which is the minute hand, points straight up to 12, it is 7 o'clock. And she knows that when the long hand gets down to the bottom at 6, it is 7:30, and time for her to start to bed. So she has the time from now to 7:30 to finish writing her invitations. In this story, we're going to learn a number of things about time and how to tell time by reading clocks. Whenever the picture goes dark, like this, it means that time is passing. Now quite a bit of time has passed, and Barbara has finished writing her invitations. What time is it now? The hour hand has passed 7, and the minute hand points straight down to 6. Yes, it's 7:30. Father says they can talk more about clocks at story time tomorrow. And if Barbara learns all about reading clocks by her birthday, maybe there'll be a special surprise present. But now it's time for Barbara to go to bed. Well, it's later, and here's Barbara all ready for bed. What time is it now? Yes, it's 8 o'clock. This is the time Barbara goes to bed every night. Good night, Barbara. Pleasant dreams. Now more time has passed, and Barbara is sound asleep. Do you think Barbara is dreaming? Let's pretend that she is. Let's pretend that Barbara is dreaming about a big clock. And let's pretend that Barbara is in the dream, too. Since this is a special kind of clock, we can take away one of the hands. This is the shorthand. It tells us which hour of the day it is. It points to 12 twice each day, once at midnight, once at noon. It moves slowly around. When this hand points to 1, it is 1 o'clock. When it points to 2, it is 2 o'clock. When it points to 3, what time is it? Now everybody call out the time as the hour hand goes around. Now the hour hand has been all the way around the clock, and it again shows that the time is 12 o'clock. Now let's put on just the long hand, which we call the minute hand. When we know all about reading clocks, we'll know how this hand shows us just what minute it is. But right now we want to learn how to tell time in quarter hours. But where has Barbara gone? Why, she has a dream pie. Now, what has a pie to do with telling time by the quarter of the hour? Look how the pie is cut into 4 pieces. We call each of the pieces a quarter of the pie. And notice how the cuts in the pie look something like the hands of a clock. We can count time by quarters as we counted the pieces of pie. 4 quarter hours make 1 hour. And the minute hand helps us count the quarter hours. It moves all the way around the clock once every hour. The minute hand moves from 12 to 3 in 1 quarter of an hour. So when it points to 3, we say it's a quarter after, or a quarter past the hour. When the minute hand points to 6, it is 2 quarters past the hour, or we say half past. When it points to 9, it has moved 3 quarters of the way, but it will be only 1 quarter of an hour until the minute hand gets back to 12. So we say it is a quarter till the next hour. And we know what the big hand means pointing to 12. And on the real clock in Barbara's bedroom, both hands are pointing to 12. It's 12 o'clock midnight, a new day. But Barbara is sound asleep. Now it's morning, and Barbara's father is leaving the house to go to work. What time do you think it is? It's 8 o'clock in the morning. At 8 o'clock each morning, Father gets on this bus to go to work. The bus driver knows he must come at the same time every morning because people depend on him to get them downtown at the right time. What time is it now? Barbara has to be in school by 9 o'clock. Do you think she'd better be getting started? There she goes now. All day long, people all over town have to know what time it is. Some people have to get on trains that leave at a certain time every day. At the airport, other people are waiting for a plane that comes in at a certain time. When you go to the doctor or the dentist, you make an appointment to be there at a certain time. Now it's afternoon, and Barbara greets Father as he arrives home. But what does he have there from the closet? It's an old alarm clock that doesn't run anymore. But Father says it will be a fine thing to use in talking about telling time, because you can move the hands by turning the knob at the back. Let's see if you can tell time as well as Barbara can. What time is it when the hour hand points to 6 and the minute hand is straight up? Now it takes 5 minutes for the minute hand to move from one number to the next. You can count by fives, can't you? When the minute hand is at 1, it is 5 minutes past 6. Now it's 2 5s, or 10 minutes past. 15 minutes, or a quarter past. 20 minutes past, and so on. When we know how to count by fives, we know how to tell time with a minute hand. Now Father is asking if Barbara knows what we use to tell what day it is. What do you suppose Barbara went to get? Here it is, a calendar. You see, a calendar is a way of telling time too, the days, the weeks, and months. There's today, Friday, March 24th. Tomorrow will be Saturday, the 25th. Then Sunday, and a new week. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And then it'll be Friday again. On the page for April, Barbara found her birthday already marked. And now the big day has come, Barbara's birthday, and there's a party. Even the candles on Barbara's cake are a way of telling time, how many years old she is. Do you know? Mother has something else for Barbara. Father's present. What do you suppose it is? Now Barbara won't have to ask anyone, what time is it?
That was great. I love it. As someone said, I think it was Sean, it is time for coffee. No, it wasn't Sean. It was Alex. I'm sorry. So anyways, Alex, Rebecca, and Sean, thank you so much for the coffee. That is one way you can support AV Geeks, is by buying us delicious, hot coffee. Although we buy it ground and make it hot ourselves. And what you can do is go to ko-fi.com/avgeeks and you can buy us coffee that way. Or go to buymeacoffee.com/avgeeks. Another way you can support us is hitting the thumbs up or the like buttons or the whatever the warm fuzzies button that your social media has. That's a great way. And also sharing what we do, because what we do is important if you don't know how to tell time and you don't understand the concepts of time. Behind me I've got the telecine set up, and we've got a film set up to watch. What is it? Visual Perception. And this was part of a film series called Horizons of Science, I believe. And so there's some really beautiful, amazing stuff that was made. So let's watch that. Hold on. It's not behaving. 1 second. Hopefully this won't crash. I'm trying. There it is. Okay, here we go. Visual Perception. Enjoy.
Some of the most interesting problems in science today concern the workings of the human mind. Even so apparently simple a process as seeing, for example, not only the eye acting as a camera, the system conveying the picture brain, and the brain process. Let me show you. Experience has shown that objects look smaller when they are farther away. The railroad line appears to recede into the distance. This man looks farther away than this man. Yet we actually know that the picture consists of just a few lines drawn on a flat blackboard. Plainly, the mind has interpreted the picture in terms of our knowledge and experience. In the Horizons of Science film program, we want to look into some of the unsolved problems in science today, to meet some of the people working at them, to see and hear them at work, and to try to share their experiences and their points of view. Today, we will meet a psychologist, Dr. Hadley Cantrell, who is interested in some of the unsolved problems in the field of visual perception. At the Perception Demonstration Center at Princeton University, psychologists are asking questions about how we see. In everyday life, we all believe that what we see is really there. If we didn't believe this, if we couldn't depend on it, we wouldn't be able to get along successfully in life. When we look at this room, for example, we assume that it is like other rooms. It has walls like a room, windows like a room, a floor and a ceiling like a room. It must be a room. Yet, what we see is not always the same as what is actually there. In any normal room, a marble wouldn't run uphill. This is Dr. Hadley Cantrell, director of the Center and former chairman of the Psychology Department of Princeton University. As a psychologist, he has concentrated in the study of perception and behavior. Through a series of scientific demonstrations, he is investigating the way the eye and mind combine to create our world of awareness. Such investigations attempt to probe beyond the physical act of seeing to a better understanding of human experience. For centuries, philosophers and scientists have debated the act of perception. How closely does objective reality correspond with what we see? Dr. Cantrell.
Although you probably noticed that this model room is far from normal shape, it is constructed to appear normal from one point of view. The chin rest and eye patch allow us to see it with one eye from that exact spot where it looks almost perfectly regular. From this position, the bear in the left corner seems smaller than the bear on the right. The walls are straight, the floor seems level, and the windows appear to be all the same size and shape. However, when Malcolm and Jackie look through the back windows, we can see again that something is amiss. Jackie's head seems to be much smaller than Malcolm's. Now when they exchange places, it's Malcolm who seems to have the smaller head. As we go off to one side, however, we see that the room is distorted and the heads become normal. We assume that the room is like nearly all the rooms we are used to, with rectangular walls. And so, in order to keep this assumption, we adjusted objects or people to conform with our fixed idea of the room. And so it is with most of our perceptions. Our assumptions usually work, but they are sometimes wrong. This window, for example, looks like many of the windows of familiar past experience. We quite reasonably assume that this one is similar to them. As the window moves, you will see that it appears to oscillate, to start turning one way and then turn back and go the other way. And you will also notice that the mullions of the window, that is the cross pieces, vary in thickness as the window oscillates. We are putting a green cover over the window in order to give a clue as to what's really happening. Do you still see the window going back and forth? Or do you now see it going clear around? if you keep looking at one part of the green cover, say one of the lower corners, you will probably see that it is going around in a circle, just as the window is. The oscillating motion is an illusion. What you think you see does not correspond with what is actually happening. Now, what can explain this illusion? Why do you insist that the window moves back and forth? Without realizing it, you have probably made false assumptions about that window. You have probably assumed that it is rectangular, like most all the windows in your experience. But it is not rectangular. One edge is much shorter than the other. Since you assume that the window is rectangular, if one edge looks longer, you interpret it as being closer. But this trapezoid window is so designed that one edge always appears longer than the other. So you refuse to see the long side further away than the short side. Therefore, it oscillates back and forth instead of rotating. Now we have added to the window a short length of tube. Watch what happens to that tube. Some of you will probably notice that the tube seems to cut right through the window. Some others might see that it tends first to elongate and then to bend or wrap around like a snake before it cuts through. The reason for these two different interpretations is that you are making assumptions about that tube without knowing it, whether you see it cut through directly or bend. If you assume that it is an inflexible metal rod, you will most likely see it cut through the window without bending. However, if you assume that the tube is made of flexible rubber, you will probably see it bend before it cuts through. Whichever effect you see depends largely upon your assumptions about that tube, as we have demonstrated by controlled experiments. Now let's see what happens when this red cube is attached to the window. Here again we see something surprising. The cube appears to be moving in a strange way. For most people, it appears to be traveling in a circular orbit clear around the window. Watch this motion carefully. Comes around and oscillates back. The oscillating motion is an illusion. What you think you see does not correspond with what is actually happening. As we can see from above, the window is really rotating, turning completely around on its axis and never changing direction. It is most important to realize that the appearance of oscillation persists even when we intellectually know that the window is rotating. In other words, knowledge alone does not very often alter our perceptions. Now if we look again at the small distorted room, we notice once more that the bears in the corners seem to be different in size. The one on the right appears much larger. As the bears exchange corners, the little bear seems to grow, and the big bear shrinks as Jackie puts him in the left corner. The bear on the left looks smaller because he is twice as far away from us as the bear on the right. We persistently assume that the room is normal and that the two corners are therefore the same distance from us. Because we are unwilling to let go of this basic assumption, we are forced to make the bears grow and shrink as they are moved about in the room. Even when the bears are held side by side, the room behind them confuses our perception, and it is hard to see that they are really exactly alike. Outside of the room, it becomes apparent that the bears are the same size, for here we correctly interpret an apparent change in size as merely changes in the bear's distance from us. In everyday life, this assumption that things look larger when close and smaller when far away is quite accurate. The balloon demonstration begins to show more about the role of our assumptions in the act of perception. If you watch the balloons carefully, I think you'll notice that as one gets closer, the other one goes farther away from you. You see that motion? One coming closer as the other goes away. The reason for this appearance of motion is your assumption that the two balloons are the same size. Therefore, the larger one seems closer to you and the smaller one farther away. Now, actually, it is only their size that changes. The balloons remain stationary as this apparatus alternately inflates and deflates them. Here again, one balloon seems to come closer as the other moves away. The one that is brighter appears closer to you than the one that is dimmer, for this is the way we most frequently experience things in everyday life. Actually, however, the balloons are still stationary. One is simply getting brighter as the other one gets dimmer. Since size and brightness are interpreted as indications of distance, we can produce an even greater illusion of motion by changing both the size and brightness of the balloons. The perception of motion which you experience here is entirely your own creation, due to the assumptions you have brought to this particular situation. The visual illusion persists, even when you know intellectually what is really happening. And so it is with most of our assumptions. They are so persistent once established that it is not at all easy to disregard them. Now we'll join Jackie for another one-eyed look at the distorted room and see what can be done about changing basic assumptions and learning new ones. From Jackie's point of view, the room looks normal, although she and we all know intellectually that it is oddly shaped. We'll see how we can learn to recognize the true shape of the room. The object here is to reach out with a pointer and touch a spot on the left corner window. It's a little difficult to reach, for the corner is much farther away than it appears to be. Now we'll try to bring the pointer swiftly across the room to the opposite window where we painted a bug for a target. Our first tries are not very successful, and progress is slow. We keep hitting the back wall because it looks straight, instead of slanting, as it really is. But gradually we can modify and correct our basic assumptions for this unusual situation. Only by acting in the distorted room, and acting for a purpose, can we see it as it actually is. We recognize its distortion only when we discover that our earlier assumptions don't work. These demonstrations in perception, devised by the late Albert Ames, Jr., seem to indicate that we can learn best, can at times only learn, through making mistakes or sharing the mistakes of others. Therefore, mistakes, instead of being things to worry about and to avoid, are really the best opportunities for learning we actually have. Jackie has now learned the shape of the room, but you'll notice she had to make mistakes to do so. Here is a big room of exactly the same proportions as the little room we have just seen. Now, instead of teddy bears, we see Jackie and Malcolm changing size. We, too, are living in a world that's constantly changing. There are constant new adjustments to be made. So it is perfectly normal for all of us to feel frustrated and anxious some of the time. We make assumptions on the basis of our past experiences. These assumptions are essentially bets that we're making, or what a statistician would call probabilities. We make these bets assuming that our past experience applies to our present situations, so that we can carry on our living to achieve some goal. We have shown here the extent to which we ourselves help to create the way in which we see things because of the assumptions we make. But if we are to carry on living effectively, we must rely on these assumptions. Otherwise, we would almost be in a state of paralysis, having to stop and test out everything we see. So we must make certainties out of probabilities. But if we can be aware that this is what we are doing, it may help us to build up better and more reliable assumptions as we constantly act on the basis of faith.
It is quite clear from Dr. Cantrell's work that seeing is more complicated than we might at first suppose. What we see is always influenced by what we take for granted. This is true not only in visual perception, but in all of science. Scientific research is based on careful, patient, accurate observation. And unaware of our assumptions, we can hardly expect to make good observations or to interpret them correctly. And we may miss the clues that might lead us to a new discovery.
Thank you, Marine Trust Company of Western New York, for sponsoring that fine film. So this is very similar to the Screen Science Digest, the Screen News Digest, where the films would be made and then they would be distributed by various sponsors in regional areas. So that's what that's about. But the color, stunning in that. And we've seen those experiments before. We've seen them in... I feel like we've seen them in the Moody Institute of Science film and in Gateways to the Mind. Maybe we haven't seen those, actually. Let me see. Because, let's see, Gateways to the Future? Gateways to the Mind, yeah. I showed that back in August of 2021. And then... I can't remember what the Moody Institute of Science one is. But anyways, so it's a popular thing. Things about optical illusions are pretty great. And they show up a lot. This next film is about worms. Enjoy. Worms. Oh, and thank you, Ewan, for the coffee. It's great. We love coffee over here. Anyways, worms. Enjoy.
This, believe it or not, is a true worm, a flower worm. Though it looks more like a flower than a worm, the common earthworm is its relative. What the earthworm lacks in beauty, it makes up for not only as fish bait, but in its important role in the animal kingdom. What is a worm? In everyday language, the word worm is applied to many small, elongate animals that creep or crawl. But everything that looks like a worm isn't a worm. Caterpillars, for example, are not really worms. They are insect larvae. Insects have jointed walking legs. No true worm has such jointed legs. Worms and worm-like animals are found in more than half of the main divisions of the animal kingdom. No single definition could describe all of them. Early scientific classifications placed many worm-like animals in a common group called vermes. Planarians, tapeworms, rotifers, and others, were grouped together with the earthworms. Later, some worms having certain distinctive structural features in common were placed under a separate phylum called Annelida, or annelid worms. There are 4 classes of annelids. The Archaeannelida, consisting of a few genera of simplified forms, one of which is represented by this specimen. The Hirudinea, or leeches. The Oligochaeta, mostly land and freshwater forms. And the Polychaeta, mostly marine forms. The word annelida is from the Latin for ring. The body of an annelid is ringed or grooved. Internally, it is divided into a series of segments called somites, with walls or septa between the segments. This type of segmentation is a characteristic which makes the annelids different from all other worm-like animals. The sipunculid is not an annelid, since its rings are only skin deep. Annelid segmentation is internal as well as external. The Hirudinea, or leeches, live in fresh and salt water, and in damp places on land. A suction cup at each end of its body helps the leech hold onto surfaces as it loops along. Leeches also swim. They have no bristles. They feed on smaller animals. Some are scavengers. A few species suck blood from vertebrates. Here, some small leeches have fastened to a fish's fin by their suckers. A larger species was commonly used in the early practice of medicine to withdraw blood from sick people. The Oligochaeta include over 5,000 species of earthworms and many related forms. Oligochaeta means few bristles. The bristles on an earthworm are almost invisible to the naked eye. But small as they are, without them the worm could hardly crawl. They catch onto surfaces and aid the action of the muscles to move the worm along. Let us view some of the other characteristics that distinguish annelids from other worms in the drawings which follow. We can see in this cross-sectional view that a true body cavity, or coelom, lies between the outer body wall and the digestive tract. 5 pairs of hearts, numerous blood vessels, and a network of capillaries make up the circulatory system. A brain, connected by a double nerve cord to nerve centers or ganglia in each segment, and the nerve fibers form the nervous system. Earthworms are hermaphroditic, which means that each worm has both male and female sexual organs. In mating, sperm is transferred from each worm to the other and is stored in seminal receptacles. The eggs of each worm are fertilized later during the egg-laying process. Earthworms breathe through minute pores in the body surface. Respiration requires a moist skin. That is why they live in damp soil and only come out of their burrows at night when the air is humid. But when heavy rains saturate the ground, earthworms are forced to the surface in search of oxygen. The earthworm has no head as such, but it has a mouth covered by a fleshy lobe. Earthworms literally eat their way through the soil. Nourishment is digested from organic matter in the soil they swallow. Waste products are eliminated through pores in the body surface and by the digestive tract. Waste material from the digestive tract is often deposited at the burrow entrance in small mounds. Earthworms may transfer over an inch of enriched soil to the surface every 10 years. Their burrows help aerate the soil. Wherever man cuts a furrow, the activity of earthworms probably adds much to the fertility of the soil, and thus performs a continuous service of untold value. The polychaetes comprise the largest and most generalized class of annelids. Polychaeta means many bristles, and many polychaetes are called bristleworms. Most polychaetes live in the sea. Some are free-swimming. Others live in tubes or burrows, under rocks or in the mud or sand. But none is more interesting than one that lives here. Its open tube ends are spaced about 10 to 12 inches apart on an average. We'll dig one out of the sand for a good look. The parchment-like U-shaped tube is formed by a mucus secretion from the worm's body. And here in a cutaway setup is the tube dweller Chaetopterus. An odd creature it surely is. All polychaetes have a distinct head and tentacles. These wing-like structures aid in food collecting. The black parts contain the digestive and other vital organs, and this is the food-gathering cup. These fan-like structures are used to cause a flow of water through the tube. Most of the body segments, or somites, have rows of fleshy appendages on both sides called parapodia, which are used in breathing and locomotion. On its back are suction cups to fasten the worm to its tube and to aid in movement. Now let's see how all this works. The fans, which are really modified parapodia, cause a current of water to flow through the tube. The head and wings of the worm channel the water flow between them. The wings secrete a net of mucus, invisible in the water, in which the tiny food particles are caught. The food cup picks up the mucus net with the entrapped food and forms it into a small pellet. Reversing the current flow, the worm floats the food ball up to its mouth and swallows it. Here's another odd sea worm. It has many tentacles at its head end, which reach out in all directions to pick up tiny particles of food. It builds a tube of sand and mucus under a rock. The worm also uses its tentacles to pull itself along. It has brightly colored, spongy gills for breathing. The painful sting of this worm's bristles, when handled, has given it the name fireworm. The body surface of an annelid is sensitive to light. The reaction of the 2 rows of gills down the center of this worm's back demonstrates this light sensitivity. Watch the gills as they react to a change in light intensity. As the worm swims and crawls in the water, the stiff bristles extending from its parapodia are used as locomotors. This is Nereus, the familiar clamworm of the New England coast. It also uses its parapodia for both crawling and swimming. The parapodia along the sides of polychaetes contain gill-like breathing organs and represent one of the earliest types of development of definite breathing organs in the animal kingdom. Here's another bristleworm that lives under rocks along the seashore and feeds on small invertebrates, or animals without backbones. Like many polychaetes, it is most active at night. Prettiest of the annelids are the flower worms. These dainty and colorful polychaetes live within various kinds of tubes built by secretions from their bodies. When disturbed, the worms pop back into their tubes. They breathe through their feathery gills, which also filter minute food particles from the water. Whatever their kind, worms are unusually interesting animals. Some are of great benefit to man. And a few of them are even beautiful.
Since this is AV Geeks 60mm lunch, I'm actually having lunch while I'm watching this beautiful footage of worms excreting. My wife made this bento box for me, and it's filled with leftover enchiladas, and what else we got? Some apples, clementine, and some nuts. So we're trying to eat a little healthy here. Anyways, we said we'd come back, and so here we are.
This is your Navy. The ships, the guns, the planes, the men. This is the greatest assembly of sea power that the world has ever seen. 50,000 vessels, 34,000 planes, more than 3 million fighting men. And we haven't finished yet. Each day your Navy grows, gains new sinews of steel, becomes more terrible in its striking power. This is your Navy. You ordered it, you built it. Your sons, your husbands, your brothers are the flesh and blood of it. Its Commander-in-Chief and Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral Ernest J. King.
This picture is in the nature of a report on some of the things your effort and your savings have made possible. Today we hold the initiative. We are on the offensive, able to attack the enemy at places of our own choosing. That we are able to do so is a tribute to every one of you. For your labor and your money have provided the tools that we needed.
Yes, today we are on the offensive. These are American troops on the island of Guam, 3,000 miles back on the road to Tokyo. We said we'd come back. Once again, Old Glory flies above the American soil that was in enemy hands for nearly 3 years. What did it take to put her there? It took a lot of things. It took battleships like the Washington here. This 35,000-ton monster can hurl 10 tons of steel and high explosive 20 miles in 1 minute of salvo firing. Her secondary and anti-aircraft batteries can pump a continuous curtain into the sky to protect both herself and the carrier she escorts. One down, and another. That's firepower. It took cruisers like the San Francisco, which slugged it out in the dark with a Jap battleship off Lunga Point. Fast and heavily armed, the cruiser is the middleweight of the fleet. And destroyers, cans the sailors call them because of their thin skins. But the can is hard to hit. This new destroyer can log over 35 knots, turn on a dime, and packs a big enough wallop in her torpedo tubes to sink anything afloat. Submarines like this one being launched at Manitowoc, Wisconsin, a tribute to the versatility of American shipbuilders. No enemy vessel anywhere is safe from your Navy subs. They have fired their tin fish in the harbors of Japan, sunk more than 750 Jap ships. And the little PTs, the sea wolves which harried the Tokyo Express, prevented supplies from reaching beleaguered Jap garrisons. It took ingenuity, adaptability. and the Navy has demonstrated plenty of each. We couldn't spare enough destroyers to guard our convoys against the U-boats. Here is one answer: the DE, Destroyer Escort. Lighter than a destroyer, but tough enough to handle any sub. More than 300 DEs were rushed into mass production by the Navy. Watch this one make a depth charge attack. She packs a knockout punch. Germany almost won the last war with U-boats. This time, the Axis, determined not to miss, produced a U-boat fleet of huge size. Here's another answer: the baby flat top. These converted merchant ships made it impossible for the U-boat to find safety in mid-ocean. They carry their squadrons of deadly Grumman Avengers wherever a submarine can go, and launch a patrol which covers hundreds of miles of ocean. Flying artillery. These Avengers are equipped with a forward-firing rocket, which can go in one side of a sub and out the other. Watch this one fire. But a Navy isn't all ships and planes and guns. It's men, too, and they need taking care of. Your Navy is undoubtedly the most lavish in its care of the wounded and ill of all navies of the world. Highly trained corpsmen go in with the first attack wave, carrying life-giving plasma and sulfa drugs. The wounded are evacuated with all possible speed to the ships, where well-equipped operating rooms are available. Cutting down the period between injury and treatment has been responsible for the amazingly high rate of recovery from wounds in this war. Each advance base has its own hospital with all the paraphernalia of a hospital at home and the skills of specialists to use it. Their spiritual health is taken care of too. Each ship, each unit has its chaplain. Freedom of worship is one of the things these men are fighting for, and they carry their freedoms with them. To advance in the Pacific took a lot of know-how. Routing the Japs out of scores of islands put the emphasis on amphibious warfare. Your Navy learned by experience. Improvised dozens of specialized craft to do the job. Ships with tanks and trucks in their bellies. Tanks that swim. Assault boats that carry the Marines to the beaches. This one carries its own artillery to rip a beachhead apart as it goes in. Yes, rockets again. And watch their terrific destructive power. Know-how is the word for the Seabees, the Navy's construction battalion. Craftsmen and builders all, they land right behind the assault troops and show the enemy what real construction speed is. The airstrip is the important thing. The ships and carriers make the gain. The airstrip consolidates it. The Seabees are carving this one through solid jungles. Yes, solid mahogany jungle. This is 5 days after the landing. There are still Japs on the island, but the airstrip must be built. And the Seabees are trained to drop their work and pick up a gun, like the old frontiersmen. Here's the strip 21 days after the landing. 1,000 yards long and thick enough to take a fully loaded Liberator. They're a new branch in an old service, and the Navy is proud of them. Yes, it takes a lot of things. For this Navy, this colossus of sea power, is a complex, highly integrated engine of destruction. Each unit is designed to play its part in the advance, and each must function smoothly. But let's watch a complete naval operation, the recapture of Guam. Here, a task force leaves Island X. Over at Island Y, other units of the fleet assemble and take on supplies for the same assault. These are the big ones, which will smash Jap pillboxes, gun emplacements, ammunition, and fuel dumps. They cost $850 apiece, and one BB can fire hundreds in a day. But every pillbox smashed means American lives saved. Meanwhile, the carriers are standing off Guam, launching flight after flight of dive bombers and Avengers to pound the Jap defenses. Enemy aircraft have been liquidated, and the dive bombers have it their own way. 12 solid days of this, softening up the island.
fleet arrives, and the heavy guns of the battleships and cruisers begin to search out enemy positions. 5 more days of this, with the ships creeping closer and closer. Here's teamwork for you, and death for the enemy. Now the landing craft come in, wave on wave. These men are hardened veterans of amphibious war. They've never been stopped yet. The beachhead is secured, and the fighting moves inland. Here's what the Navy bombardment did to Jap defenses. That bombardment cost $50 million. We think it was worth it. But not all the lives could be saved. It cost a lot of American blood. 1,226 dead, 5,765 wounded. Guam is again ours. We said we'd come back. That was one action, one unit of the fleet. For actions still to come, we have at our disposal the mightiest fleet that ever sailed the seas. 24 battleships. More than 70 carriers. Four cruisers. $376 destroyers. $587 other warships. $3,439 auxiliary vessels and other craft. More than 42,000 amphibious craft. $34,000 planes. And we are still building. Secretary of the Navy, the Honorable James B. Forrestal.
What you have seen is your Navy, and you can well be proud of it. It has cost heavily in time, in work, and in money. It will cost a lot more. We have spent already about $70 billion upon our Navy, and we have the authority of Congress to spend $50 billion more if we need it. The power that we now have has taken about 4 years in the building. It has been a good investment because our material superiority has saved and is saving the lives of many thousands of our men who are paying the real price of this war. The men who fight. There is no way of measuring the value of an American life in dollars and cents. But I don't believe that any one of you would withhold the loan of the price of a new motor car, for example, if you thought that it would save the life of a single American.
Said we'd come back. A lot of Navy films around World War II and post World War II were fundraising for war bonds. That's what I've discovered. If I see something that has a provocative title and it's around that time in the 40s, then it's almost always like and you can help us by supporting with war bonds. Fascinating footage, lots of great war special effects, sounds, etc. But thanks for joining us today. Ran a little late, but that's fine. We had to watch that film about worms. It was beautiful color footage of worms. Join us tomorrow, 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, and we will watch more films because we got a bunch. We have 20,000 plus. It's like probably over 24,000 plus. And we've only seen, we've only seen on the show 2,375. So we got a ways to go. We've only done like less than a tenth of the number of films, and we have to watch them all. We have no choice. Why would I collect them except to show them to you? So, thanks again for tuning in. Thanks again for the coffee, which you can buy us. ko-fi.com/avgeeks or buymeacoffee.com/avgeeks. Hit like, subscribe, and we'll see you tomorrow. Everybody have a great Monday, and we will see you soon. Take care.